Why? Tough question. I never thought of writing a book. When I started the movement, I gave a speech. I was invited to give a speech. People cried in that speech. People gave me 2 standing ovations. This never happened in the history of that conference. When I came down the stage, this lady came to me and she said, "When we are going to read your story?" And I thought, who would ever be interested in reading about my insignificant life? But that really sparked the idea of writing this book. I gave the speech in 2012, and that's when I started writing it. It was also Freedom Forum, and it's hosted by Human Rights Foundation. It's based in New York, and they invite activists from all around the world to tell their stories of standing against tyranny, standing and fighting for human rights. That was in Oslo. I'm born in Mecca in the year of trouble, I call it, which is 1979. Mom, she's from Libya, that's North Africa. She met Dad because of faith. She came for Hajj and she met my father in Mecca. They fell in love, they got married. My father is from Mecca. Hajj is, so once in a lifetime for the Muslim who's able, he's required to perform Hajj, which is visiting the holy site of Mecca and performing certain rituals, and that will make your faith complete. That's my hometown, Mecca. This is the holy Kaaba. One of the rituals, we perform tawaf, 7 circles around this holy Kaaba. I miss Mecca. So the Kaaba or Mecca is for Muslims only, so non-Muslims are not allowed to visit Mecca or Medina, the two holiest cities for the Muslims. And so only Muslims go there. We go either to perform Hajj once in a lifetime, or you can go for a visit, which is called Umrah. Umrah is a small version of Hajj that you can do any time of the year, and it literally means visit, to visit the holy site of Mecca. Died? For what? Died? It didn't happen many times, really. It happened few times for some reasons that they explained why. Not the last Hajj, I can't remember the last 10 beats that happened, which are over 1,000 died. But it's not really often. Security there is very strict, and they always have these hundreds of thousands of people organizing the Hajj for the Muslim to make it smooth. I did Hajj myself as a Muslim, as a devout Muslim. You have to do it once in your lifetime, and it was very smooth. So accidents happen in big gatherings. When you talk about 1 million Muslim in a very small city the size of Mecca, between mountains, it's a valley between mountains, accidents does happen, yes. So in Islam you have 5 pillars of Islam, and to be full Muslims you have to fulfill these 5 pillars. The 5th pillar in Islam, so the first pillar, for example, is to believe in God. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet, peace be upon him. And the last pillar of Islam is performing Hajj. This is why Muslims go to Mecca, to have the full faith, to become full Muslims, I would say. For Hajj, it depends on how long you want to spend there. But for the Hajj days itself, you don't have to be there more than a week. But people like to spend more time in Mecca. You pay for it. Everyone pays for himself. And we believe that if you pray, so when we pray, God accepts our prayers. But in Mecca, each prayer you make, it's worth 100,000. This is why it's very important for the Muslims to go there. It's like you can pray 1 year, and if you go to Mecca, you stay there 1 week. The deeds you get from Mecca, being in Mecca, praying in Mecca, it's worth years of your lifetime. Me, I'm Muslim. Of course I believe in God. I believe in Prophet Muhammad. I'm just against radical Islam. I'm against the Orthodox Islam that's been taught to us in schools growing up. It's a sign of respect to Prophet Muhammad that when you mention his name, and it's not only for Prophet Muhammad, by the way. So if I mention the name of any prophet, Adam, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, we have to mention peace be upon him. It's asking blessings from God to them for giving us, for leading humankind to the faith, to God, to the truth. A lot of things, but I think the peace that you get being a Muslim, the peace that you get believing in God, and It's interesting that people have this misconception about Islam, that it's the ideology of hate that we see today and the violence. It's not. Islam itself means submission to God, and the first thing when you meet a Muslim, they say peace be upon you. So it's peaceful. It calls for morals. It calls for good deeds. It calls for a lot of good things in any society that they want to have there. What we lost from Islam is the preaching, and the scholars, they are emphasizing on trivial things that made us lose the essence of Islam, which is being in peace with yourself, being in peace with the other, accepting, mercy. We lost that, I don't know, somewhere when it became political, when it was used as a political weapon. Oh, throughout history, whether Islam, whether any other religion, being used as a political weapon. In Europe, the Inquisitions, in the Muslim world, when you use one faith against the other, and you call them infidel. Any ideology, actually, used to gain power, that's when it becomes dangerous. So I used to live in Saudi. I moved to Dubai. I lived 5 years. Only 2 months. We moved to Sydney, Australia. Yes, that's where I live. I am married with my second husband, who's from Brazil, and we have a boy. My first son, Abdullah, is right now he's 11, and my second boy, he will turn 3 next month. Long story short, my husband is working there now, but he didn't want to go back to Brazil because it's violent, and he wanted to go to a country where he can have a better life for our kids, for Daniel. Not a lot. Did I talk a lot in the book about the divorce? I just talked about, because it was so difficult for a woman to get divorced because she's not supposed to. I didn't get support from the family. They were against it, although I explained it's an abusive relationship. And the Saudi courts is not a friendly place to women, really. It's thrown out from the society, from the court, from the legal system for a woman to get divorced. It's really difficult. But for me, when I got divorced, it was kind of liberating when I left my ex-husband. Actually, my first husband was my first love. I wasn't interested in any men before. I had crushes, yes. So I grew up in a society where men and women are isolated. My own cousins, I cannot see them. Once I got my period, once the girl reached puberty, she is not allowed to see men. So the only men I see in my life is my father and my brother. The first time I see a man, or I interact with a man who's different than my father and my brother, was when I got my first summer job. I was 23, and I remember, 22 actually, and I remember it was interesting to see, to find that I can work with all these men and talk to them for the first time in my life. After reaching puberty, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, I got so many crushes actually, but it would last for a week and leave. And it makes sense later on for me, because I was not allowed to be introduced to the men world, to know how they talk, what they think of, to even just talk to them. You create this, I would say, bizarre situations that leads to bizarre feelings. So the first rule for a woman is her best place is her home. Not her job, not education, not the mosque, not outside, is her home. So it's highly encouraged for us to stay home, and if I ever want to leave the house, it should be for urgency, it should be for something really, really important, and I have to take the man permission to leave the house. My husband, my father. Also the segregation between the sexes. And you find it in everywhere. If you go to a restaurant, if you go to a bank, if you go to a government office, the men and women are segregated. The schools, the university. When I went to university, I've never seen my teachers. All of them were, most of them actually, were men. I've never talked to them. I see them through closed circuit TV, CCTV. This is how I used to see my teachers. We were not even allowed to talk to them. We had a teacher in the class. She would call them if we have a question, and she asked this question on our behalf. So this is how you grow up. Also, the list of things you cannot do, just being a woman, were really huge. you cannot dress anything in public, but you have to put on the abaya. It was expected in my city, because it was a very conservative city, Mecca, to cover my face, not to talk to men. It wasn't encouraged to use our first names. So at the end of the school, when they would call my name, if my father is outside, I'm not allowed to be standing outside. They have to call me through the mic, the guard, the security guard. He calls through the mic, or the gatekeeper. He calls my father's name. He doesn't call my name. And the list goes on and on. Yes, this is us in Saudi Arabia. But actually, they're showing their hands, they're showing their feet. Things are different now. We were fully covered, and we have to put on the abaya, the one in Mecca, at least, in my city, because it's very conservative. Yes, so this is the millennia. This is the new generation. They don't accept to cover their face. And now they're wearing colorful abayas, which was something that thrown at. You can never wear cover. When I worked in Aramco in the Eastern Province, I insisted on wearing colorful scarves. And I was totally different than everyone else. But now more and more girls even wear the colorful abaya, and I hope things loosen up. They are pushing the rules to be able to choose the clothes they want, the decent or the modest clothes they want as a Muslim, but it shouldn't be abaya, it shouldn't be black. Okay, there are rules from Prophet Muhammad for sure, but it's all about the interpretation of these texts that comes from Prophet Muhammad. So there are, as I explained, for example, the 5 pillars of Islam that we follow. But there are rules that is imposed that are not meeting the 2017, the 21st century. One of them, I'll just give you one example. At the time of Prophet Muhammad, they expect the woman, when she travels, she has a man companion. Makes sense, because it was very dangerous when you travel. There will be thieves, there will be killers on these deserts, and you're using caravans, camels. It takes days. No, you don't need that. You don't need a guy to travel with me to protect me. He's not going to carry a gun and protect me. So the rules, when they are taken from textbooks that's 1,000 or 1,400 years ago, it should be reinterpreted to meet the current situation. That's the problem we face with the scholars in Islam when they say you cannot interpret it anyway, but it should be done exactly the same way it was done in Prophet Muhammad's time. For example, cutting hands. You cannot tell me now you have correctional facilities and we still cut hands. And this debate is being going on with the scholars. I'm not a scholar, but it terrifies me when they still insist that we cut hands. I haven't known, but it was carried out in Saudi Arabia. I haven't heard about it recently, but it has been carried out. Oh, you get killed in Saudi Arabia? Yeah, you cannot announce that you're homosexual in Saudi Arabia. Religion is I try to stay away from religion because I'm in peace with every single different faith and belief and sexual orientation. But if I mention these things in my country, it's thrown at. You cannot discuss homosexuality in my country, for example. It's something that's a taboo that we cannot talk about in Saudi Arabia. So I keep these beliefs to myself, and I try to push the things without offending the believers, I would say. The things that I believe it should change in my country and has no base in Islam, that you're pushing it on us. So growing up, my generation was expected to discipline your kids with a stick. We call it the bamboo stick or khayzarana. It was expected in the school that if you don't behave, you also are disciplined with a wooden ruler. So we were brought up this way. So mom and dad would discipline in the house if they think we misbehave, and the same thing happens in the school. One boy was killed because his teacher beat him badly, and then they had to ban the beating in school, but the beating in the houses, it was not criminalized until recently. There was anti-domestic violence law that was passed recently. It's not enforced yet, but it's a good start to stop this, I would say, culture of that you can discipline someone by beating them, the physical abuse, I would call it. My sister, she beat me the most. I had my share of beating growing up in Saudi Arabia. And that what ended actually my marriage. That when I left it was because of the physical abuse, not only the emotional abuse. physical abuse with the hand, punching. And in Saudi Arabia, if a woman go to the police and she reports the man, they would summon him, they would ask him to sign, they would not put him in jail, even if she has a medical report. They would summon him and he have to sign a pledge promising not to beat her again. The problem, she gets sent to the same abuser house. And this is the case of Maryam Al-Utaibi. She's a girl who's 29 years old. She was beaten. She complained against her brother, who's younger than her. Her father complains against her to drop the charges, and she was sent to jail, not her brother. The social media went into frenzy. They let the girl out. 6 months later, she's living in an abusive house. She finds a job. She leaves the house. They put her back in jail for the crime of being absent from her abuser's house. So that's a problem that we don't have. Even if there is shelters for women in Saudi Arabia, it's poorly managed, because they treat those abused women and victims as criminals. They lock them in those houses. And for a woman to leave the shelter, she needs the guardian, who is her abuser, to sign the papers so she leaves the shelter or jail, let's say. There is also the story of Dina Al-Isloom, who ran away from her abusive family. They caught her in Manila. She was on the way to Australia for asylum. They caught her in Manila and they sent her back, handcuffed, duct tape in her mouth. And she's in jail. She's in a correctional facility for women under 30. This is what happened to the abused women in my country. I was working in Aramco. Yes, I agree that social change is the one that will lead change in Saudi Arabia. That I always, and this is the beautiful thing about Saudi Arabia, by the way, the government invests so much in women education. I get free education. I got free education. I went to computer science college, and women are sent now abroad to study for their master's degree, PhD, and even bachelor degree, fully covered by the government. They invest a lot in our education. Our problem is the frustration when I go back home or when I finish my education and I don't find a job. Because we are only 14%. It was 11% like 2 or 3 years ago. Now we're 14% only of the workforce. And we're highly educated women, half of the society, but we can't find jobs. And I believe a woman can reach her full potential, cannot reach her full potential, unless she gets a good education and she is financially independent from the man, so she can really own her life and own her decisions. And I do agree, educated working woman is what Saudi Arabia needs today. Aramco is right now the name. It used to be the Arabian American Oil Company. The government in the 80s and the 70s, they bought all the shares. It became fully owned by the Saudi government, and now it's known as the Arabian Oil Company. That's Aramco, and Aramco is in charge of producing oil, all the oil field under the control of Aramco. They're the largest, we used to be, until 2015, I think, we used to be the largest producer of oil in the world, until America took over. That's Aramco. It started by Americans, now it's fully owned by Saudis. But it did inherit, I would say, the discrimination laws against women from the Americans, and it was not changed in the last 80 years. And the company started in 33. Actually, 33. This is the interesting thing. When the company started, and I know women who worked in Aramco before it was owned by the Saudis, there were a lot of discriminative laws by Americans in Aramco against women in this company. That's interesting. The Saudis inherited it and kept it, I think. Maybe they created their own rules. I don't know really the history. It's a very secretive company. They try to keep very low profile. They don't like bad publicity, and they're going public next year. They like only to say, to keep their low profile. But in my book, there's a whole chapter where I bring up a lot of policies that are unjust and discriminating against me for being not only a woman, but also for being a Saudi woman working in Aramco. I joined them in 2002, and I quit my job in 2012. And it was the only place for me. We were 60 girls graduating from computer science in King Abdulaziz University in Jeddah. We were only 2 girls from that whole 60 girls class got jobs. I was very lucky to get a job with Aramco, because for me at that time, 2002, there were no jobs for me to work anywhere. So when I joined Aramco 2002, Unfortunately, as a Saudi woman, not as a woman can live in the compound, but as a Saudi woman, I was not allowed to live in the compound. And I was not allowed to live I was not allowed even to rent an apartment outside the compound, because the government won't allow me to rent an apartment as a woman. I was not even allowed to stay in a hotel room, because the government also wouldn't allow me to rent a hotel room without a mahram, a man. It was up to 2007, out of policy, the company allowed women to live in the compound. That's when I got my divorce. When I found a place to stay, I left my marriage. And that's when things started really changing starting 2007 and 2008 in the company. He's in Saudi Arabia with his grandmother. No, not with his father. He took him from me after I got married again, and he's living with his grandmother. I always go and see him. I always go and visit him, because he lives in the grandmother house. She's more of my own mother too. No, I wish I can move back to Saudi Arabia, but my second marriage is not approved and not recognized by the government. For me as a Saudi to marry non-Saudi, if I'm a man or a woman, the rule applies to both. I need a special permission from the Minister of Interior, which they wouldn't grant me until now. And I know it's because of my activism, I wasn't granted this permission. So my two sons never met each other. I cannot take Daniel Hamza, my second son, I cannot take him with me to Saudi. He's not recognized as my son. I'm still, under the Saudi law, I'm still divorced. Although I'm 5 years married. And my first son, Abdullah, he cannot visit me. He cannot leave the country. He leaves the country with his father, but he cannot leave the country with me. Oh my God, 21st. Hopefully when he's a teenager, he can speak up. He can speak up for himself, and he requires and demands the right to visit his mother. No, just one time. I don't know, sometimes they write that I've been multiple times. No, it's just one time. The first time I was in detention, they arrested me and they released me. And the second time I was sent to prison for driving while female. It was in my paper, driving while female. It means that it's a woman driving a car. They will come and really argue that it's a society issue. Women can drive, the society don't want them to drive. But when I go out and drive, the society doesn't stop me. I drove, there were other cars there, none of them stopped me. The one who stops me are the authorities. We tell them there is no law that prevents me from driving. The traffic status code doesn't specify the gender of the driver license holder, but they insist that we cannot issue you a driver license, even if you go and apply for a driver license. And they say it's the custom, it's urf. It's complicated in Saudi Arabia. I always think it's a political issue. It has nothing to do with the society or religion. It's a political decision to allow women to drive or not. 2011, yes, 6 years ago. I was in Al Khobar city. It's 10 minutes from where I used to live, in Aramco. One of the unjust laws we have in Saudi Arabia is the ban on women driving. I was in the state in 2009, New Hampshire, the live free or die state. I got, at the age of 30, I got my first driver's license. When I went back to Saudi Arabia, I was paying, I bought my car in 2007, and it was the year 2011, this one, almost 4 years later. I finished paying the car loan. I cannot drive it. I have a driver license. I cannot drive it. I almost got kidnapped, walking in the street, looking for a taxi because it was late at night, and I couldn't find a driver to take me back home. That lit all this frustration with all these years that I live in a country where there are no public transportation, where there are no pedestrian city that I can walk, and a woman to leave the house, to do anything in her life, she needs a car, and to function or to drive this car, she needs a man. So the movement was June 17, which is coming in 2 days, in 3 days actually, this movement is simple. We said on June 17 we will go out and drive because we want to normalize women driving. That you never see women driving in the street in a huge country the size of 3 Texas. You can put 3 Texas inside Saudi Arabia, and women can't drive. We wanted to change this by this movement, and the movement is going on. It never stopped. We're still campaigning for the right to drive. For us, the right to drive is more act of civil disobedience, because women is not supposed to drive. we show that we are capable of driving our own life and being in the driver's seat of our own destiny by doing this act of civil disobedience. Actually, that was when I was walking alone in the street at 9 p.m. and my face was uncovered. That's when I got the harassment. When I drove the car with Wajiha, no one talked to us. They were looking at us. They couldn't believe that I'm a woman driving, and they would just talk to his wife or talk to the people around them, and they would let us go. In Saudi Arabia, I think it's just men. It's a global issue when it comes to the control over the woman body. It's a battlefield for men. You have to dress up a certain way, or you have to cover up because your body doesn't belong to you. The body belongs to the man who owns you, or the man, or the men, I would say, how they want to look at women. This is what bothers me a lot. Really nasty, especially in my hometown, Mecca. It was so difficult for me sometimes. I would just have to throw my headscarf on my face because they would not approve women walking without uncovering her, without covering her face. Things are changing now. I can go freely now without my face being covered. Especially the young generation are helping, stopping the people questioning your belief for uncovering your face. Who are the religious police? The government picks them. It's as powerful as a ministry. The head of the religious police, we call them Hay'a, and it used to be this way. It's changed now, thankfully. I wrote a piece about it in New York Times called "Reign in the Religious Police," what I call to really cripple the absolute power they're giving when they walk in the street, being able to arrest people for reasons they don't understand, because they don't have a list of sins that they will check the adherence to following these, I would say, laws or the sins they have to check that no one is committing. They didn't have that. It's very subjective. So they would go on the street, out of the blue, you're sitting talking to your friend let's say in a cafe. He would come and attack you and say, your eyes, you're putting so much makeup if you're uncovered now. He could, I remember my brother was once, it was a very crowded place, they were waiting in the mall, and he just put his hand around his wife. They arrested him for doing that. Why do you show signs of public affection in public? And he said, she's my wife, I'm just protecting her from the people around us. He was arrested, and he was interrogated, he was locked. So they used to do these things. They chased two boys in their car. They played the music loud on the National Day. They chased them. They pushed them over. They forced them to be pushed over a bridge. Both brothers died on the National Day for listening to music on their car. Things changed now. So last year, I think it was last year, when they had to take the power of arrest from them. So they have to call the police if they say something that is un-Islamic. The religious police have been always a problem in the society, because you don't feel a normal life there. You always feel you've been watched. Your morals are always questioned, and it's always subjective on the mood of the religious man, this religious policeman member, and where he would insult you, call you names, even beat you without facing any consequences. In prison, so I was arrested the first time on purpose, because I wanted to pass by a police car and get arrested. The second time I drove, I was with my brother. I proved the point when I was in the traffic police station, I proved the point that I did not break a law. I broke custom or urf, and they're not allowed to arrest me. And I said, I'm going out again and driving. The same day at 2 a.m., they sent the secret police to my house in Aramco compound, because the police cannot go inside the compound. They had to send the secret police, and I was arrested and sent to jail without a trial. The same night, 2011, in May, yes. I was in my house in Aramco, in the women prison. It's like 15 minutes from Bahrain, where I used to live. Oh my God, it was right away. So they came at 2, I didn't leave with them until 4 a.m. And from 4 a.m. around 2 p.m. I was in jail. I was in the women's jail. So they have this ways of interrogation. So the first one, he's just like, everything is fine. We're just having some questions. Sorry to bring you this early. They ask the questions. The guy disappears, and then things change. They do another interrogation, but this one, they take your phone. They take away your phone. They took my brother away. They took my bag, and they brought a woman, a prison guard woman, sitting next to me while they're doing the same interrogation, the same questions. I was strip searched when I arrived to the prison, and by a woman, and they didn't explain to me why I was there. I said, can I talk to my family? Can I talk to can I find a lawyer? And they refused to do that. I had to plea and insist, because once I'm in jail, I don't know. Would people know that I'm in the prison? And for what? For what was the crime? No one explained to me. It was just interrogation. I managed to get a call, my sister-in-law, and when I called her, I said, Ahmed was the one from my group managing Twitter, and I said, tell Ahmed to tweet about it. She said, what's his tweet? I said, just tell Ahmed, he knows. And he did tweet about it, that I was arrested and sent to a women's prison. Oh my God, of course, my brother was one of them. He was with me when I drove the second time. My dad, he's the one who got me out of jail when he went to talk to the king. Things changed. So I changed growing up from innocent person to radical Muslim to more moderate Muslim and more open, and now to an activist. Yes, we did it, but once you get a job, once you work, and all of us got jobs, the 3 kids, it's much easier to move out of poverty. So there is a way of out of poverty in Saudi Arabia, because if the education is free, and once you get a good job, you can move out of poverty. And most of my generation, or at least the city where I lived, which is a poor city, it's not a rich city, mostly my generation, they picked up their family, they moved their family out of poverty. To go back, what was the question that we started with? Yes, it was prison bars and cockroaches. I hate cockroaches so much. I think all women hate cockroaches. It was just when I mentioned cockroaches about prison, it's just to tell you how filthy it was. So now it was very dehumanizing. It was very humiliating, the situation in the prison, and I was deeply shocked at how women strip searched, and they go inside the prison, crammed in these rooms. I really can't remember, but we had around 12 what do you call it, bunk beds in each cell, and the cells were really small, but the 12 bunk beds had more than 12 women. Of course, there were women with their kids in jail. They gave birth to these kids in jail. It was sad, and it was shocking to me, the situation there, and I brought it up to the attention, because most of the women there were non-Saudi. Most of them, more than 90% of the women there were non-Saudis. They leave the lights 24 hours. We didn't have the bathrooms didn't have doors. There are no mirrors, so you forget how you look like. I think for security reasons they don't allow it, because they could use it as a weapon. There were children with us. There were kids there in jail. There was a very the whole situation was humiliating. The first night for me, I slept on the floor because they didn't give me anything. They just pushed me in. I was taken from my home, interrogated. I was pushed in jail. No one told me why I was there. No one explained to me where should I sit or go or do anything. It was staggering. It was for the food, over your face, over your hands, it's everywhere you're sitting. There are huge cockroaches walking around, and like they live with you to the way that you get used to seeing them around you. I was there for 9 days. There was an international rally that really led to my release in 2011, and I'm very thankful for that. I think that video got the attention of the world. When I published that video, I got attention of Saudi Arabia, and the woman behind that video was sent, because we were a group of women. It wasn't men, by the way. It wasn't only me, but I was the face. I was made the face because no one wanted to do the video. I was crazy enough to go out and drive with Wajiha, and I became the face, and the world knew this is the girl who drove. She's sent to jail for driving. That brought the attention of the world. My tweet, I talked to the CNN, by the way, before 2 a.m. when they came to my house. I picked up the phone with the reporter who did an interview a week earlier, and I told her, there are people, I have no clue who they are. I don't know where they're taking me. Please write about this thing. And she did. She wrote about it. I didn't even know I needed to find an agent. I knew I wanted to write a book. I think when you know what you want, things just manifest in your life. I wanted to drive because for me driving is a way of emancipating women, because I believe that driving is the key to change our situation in Saudi Arabia and to end the male guardianship in Saudi Arabia. This was my belief. And just things show up. And I had no clue that the driving will be the symbol of resistance in Saudi Arabia. We use it as a symbol of resistance. The book agent, I had no clue. I wanted to write a book and I had no clue what to do. So I talked about around me for activists, and one of friends, he said, you need a book agent, and he introduced me to a book agent. It's Peter Bernstein. Yes. I met his dad first, Robert Bernstein, and the first thing he told me, you should write a book. His father. I met him yesterday, and he said, you should write a book. I told him, you remember, you planted that seed that I should write a book, and I just said, who would read my story, really? So I had 5 different collaborators. To be successful in writing a book, you need 2 things are essence. The first one, finding the right agent who believes in you, who will be always there, which is I was very blessed to have Peter and Amy Bernstein as my agent, and finding the right collaborator. I had very disappointing experiences with the previous collaborators, and I had to sit down and I told Peter, I'm going to write the book. I'm done with the collaborators. I do interviews for 6 months and they disappear. They don't give me a single word. So because I write, I've always wrote. I blog, I wrote diaries, I wrote stories. I wrote it in Arabic, translated in English by a native speaker. And then Lyric showed up as my 5th collaborator after I wrote most of the book, which is the good news. She had the transcript of the interviews before, plus my written, translated chapters, and she did fantastic job. I didn't have faith really in her at the start because I was mad at all the previous collaborators, and I had no clue that she would do. She did a fantastic job. Oh no, I've never met her husband. I have no. So this is my best friends really are the Jewish friends. They're the most successful. They're the one who make things go, and they're most connected. And I'm very proud that I have them as my friends. One of them is Daniel Pincus, actually, who introduced me to my agent. And Daniel Pincus runs the American Jewish Committee in New York. I think because they've been prosecuted in the past. They've been blamed for all the evil in the world, and that made them. When you really corner someone, when you prosecute someone, that make them choose one of 2: either become radical, adopt the faith of hate. I wouldn't call it the ideology of hate, or become very successful. That's a beautiful way of resistance, I think the Jews did here. Most successful friends that I have are the Jewish friends. We get a lot of benefits for free. By the way, I disagree with getting benefits for free. I want to pay taxes, and I want to get these benefits because I'm paying the taxes. I don't want any giveaway from anyone. I agree that we have over 66 slums in the holy city of Mecca. I lived on the skirt of one of these slums. And we have, because of the faith, a lot of Muslims come from very poor countries to Mecca and they stay, illegal immigrants. And most of these illegal immigrants, when they stay illegally, they build their houses in the mountains illegally, and their kids don't go to schools. And that ends up in creating all these enclaves of illegal immigrants, a lot of crime, a lot of poverty there. But also the Meccans, like me, I'm Sharif, I'm from the original people of Mecca, from Ibrahim time. The Meccans themselves too, we never had a park, for example. We didn't have infrastructure in my city. And Mecca makes so much money out of the religious tourism, the Umrah and the Hajj. And this money doesn't go to Mecca, doesn't go to build infrastructure in the city, to make it clean, to make it livable by its own people. People are too afraid to speak up against this, because in a country which is an absolute monarchy, speaking up about the distribution of wealth, about the corruption, could get you in jail, could get you arrested, could get you in so much trouble. How I kept my faith has nothing to do with them, because I know whatever they promote is not the real faith. It's their version of the faith, the ideology of hate that we are fighting back. I had my own faith without needing them, because I come from, my grandfather is Prophet Muhammad himself. We had the real faith, and it was just used in a political way to gain political power. That's the thing I'm against. When you come to this realization that your religion is being used, actually abused and misused, you become angry really, and you try to go back to the true Islam that is calling for peace and coexistence. Doesn't matter your color, doesn't matter your tongue, doesn't matter even your religion. I respect you. I respect your religion. I respect your faith, as long as we live in peace. No, you're not an infidel. So according to the Salafi Wahhabi, anyone who doesn't believe in their way or their interpretation of Islam is an infidel. That includes other Muslim faiths, by the way, the Shia, the Ismaili, the Sufi. That's their version of Islam. I believe we're all human. Doesn't matter what you believe in. You're Hindu, you're Buddha, you're religion should be used to call for peace. We need a Dalai Lama in each religion. We need a Dalai Lama for Islam that calls for forgiveness, for coexisting, for love, instead of calling for hate. He would be very angry, because it's not the true Islam. It's not what he called for. Calling for hate, this has nothing to do with Islam. It's un-Islamic to call for the hate of the other. He had the Jews living in Medina. He married a Coptic who's Christian. What's happening today is using Islam to gain political power or whatever. For me, that's unholy. For me, that's something that really makes me angry. I haven't read it yet, but finally, after years of being indoctrinated, the government is realizing and is acknowledging they made a mistake. The schools now, all the religious books that we were studying, it been changed. They removed the parts about the hate for the infidels. They removed these parts. So they're acknowledging that after it backfired, after our own sons and daughters backfired, when you have terrorist attack, when we suffered more terrorist attacks than in other part, more than in Europe, for example. We have people going to mosques and bombing these mosques. Other Muslims on Friday is the holiest day for us in the week. They realized there is a mistake, and now there is a lot of things happening to, I would say, rebel those ideas. But the problem is not in here really. The problem is when you did so much wrong things in the past, how do you go and undo them? When you have the same ideology being taught for people who come for scholarship, study in Saudi Arabia, and then they go back home with that ideology, how are you going to undo this? This is why you have radical Islam being on the rise in very peaceful countries like Indonesia, which is the largest Muslim country in the world. How do you undo this?